The golden trophy didn't just gleam under the Sydney lights, it acted as a mirror reflecting the absolute terror on the faces of the world's elite as the 2027 Rugby World Cup draw was finalised. In a move that feels more like a scripted thriller than a random selection, the hosts Australia have been thrown into a shark tank with their greatest rivals, the All Blacks, marking the first time in history these two giants will clash in the pool stages. While the room held its collective breath, the hammer fell again, pitting a revitalized England against a desperate Wales in a Group F battle that promises to be a civil war on grass. This isn't just a tournament schedule, it is a roadmap to early elimination for some of the sport's most storied programs. The shockwaves from these pairings have already begun to dismantle tactical plans 3 years in advance, as the realization set in that the path to the Webb Ellis Cup now starts with a high-stakes execution. The world was watching for a favorable path, but instead, they witnessed the birth of the most brutal opening phase in rugby history. Subscribe to all sports updates for the most explosive rugby news. The atmosphere in the Australian camp shifted from celebratory host status to a grim realization of the Herculean task ahead as soon as New Zealand was pulled into pooler. For the Wallabies, the pressure of a home World Cup is already a massive weight, but facing the All Blacks in a pool stage but slow on steroids turns the opening weeks into a do-or-die scenario. This historic first-ever pool meeting between the Trans-Tasman rivals means that one of the tournament favourites will likely enter the knockout rounds with their confidence already bruised, or worse, facing a nightmare quarter-final draw. Every local fan in Perth and Sydney knows that while the hosts get the advantage of the soil, they are now staring down the barrel of a black jersey that has traditionally acted as their kryptonite on the world stage. The strategic implications are massive, forcing the Australian coaching staff to peak much earlier than anticipated just to ensure they aren't humiliated in front of their own families. It is a gamble of epic proportions that has turned the host nation's excitement into a sharp, focused anxiety that won't dissipate until the first whistle blows. Meanwhile, the Northern Hemisphere was dealt its own hand of chaos as England and Wales were locked into a claustrophobic struggle in Pool F, alongside a dangerous Tonga and the wild card of Zimbabwe. This pairing is a haunting echo of the 2015 disaster for England, where a home soil loss to the Welsh sparked an embarrassing early exit that still stings the pride of Twickenham. Steve Borthwick's men now know they cannot afford a single minute of complacency, as the Welsh Dragons always seem to find their fiercest fire when the English white jersey is in their sights. The inclusion of Tonga adds a layer of physical brutality to this group that could leave the winner limping into the later stages, battered and bruised from a schedule that offers no easy breathing room. For Wales, currently undergoing a massive generational shift, this draw is a double-edged sword that provides a chance for ultimate redemption or a final, crushing blow to their rebuilding efforts. The rivalry is ancient, the stakes are modern, and the result will likely dictate the mood of two entire nations for the next decade. As we dive deeper into the structure, the defending champion South Africa appear to have dodged the immediate carnage, finding themselves in Pool B with Italy, Georgia, and Romania. While Rassie Erasmus will be smiling at the prospect of a controlled build-up, the real story remains the potential for a bloodbath in the quarterfinals when these pools eventually cross paths. The expansion to 24 teams was supposed to provide more opportunities for emerging nations, but the top-heavy nature of these specific pools has ensured that the traditional powers will be forced to cannibalize each other much earlier than in previous years. The narrative of the pool of death has been reinvented, not by the quality of the minnows, but by the sheer concentration of historical grudge matches at the very top of the hierarchy. Analysts are already crunching the numbers, realizing that a single slip-up in the opening weeks could result in a nightmare path through the bracket that involves facing 3 top 5 teams in a row just to reach the final. All Sports Updates brings you the edge. The tactical mind games have officially begun, with coaches already leaking stories of internal reviews and long-term planning to mask the sheer panic this draw has induced. The All Blacks, under the intense scrutiny of a post-Robertson era, cannot afford to lose to an Australian side that is desperate to prove its relevance on the world stage. Conversely, if the Wallabies can pull off a miracle in the opening match, they could ignite a national fervour that carries them all the way to the final, much like they did in 2003. The physical toll of these pool matches cannot be overstated. Playing high-intensity derbies so early in a 6-week tournament often leads to a high attrition rate among key players. We are looking at a scenario where the depth of the squad becomes more important than the brilliance of the starting 15, as the brutal nature of England versus Wales or Australia versus New Zealand will leave scars that last long after the final whistle. It is a test of endurance, a test of nerves, and a test of who can handle the suffocating pressure of history repeating itself. Further down the list, Pool C and Pool D offer their own unique brand of drama, with Argentina facing a physical Fiji side and Ireland renewing their bitter rivalry with Scotland. The Irish, perennial quarter-finalists who seem cursed to never reach the Final Four, will be watching the chaos in the other pools with a mixture of relief and trepidation, knowing that their path is equally fraught with tactical minds. The Scottish, often the forgotten men of the top tier, have a knack for upsetting the balance of power, and their clash with Ireland will likely decide who avoids the top-seeded heavyweights in the first knockout round. Every match in the 2027 cycle now carries a hidden weight, as the rankings will continue to shift and influence the seeding for the knockout bracket. The rugby world is no longer looking at 2027 as a distant event, it is a looming reality that is already dictating player contracts, coaching appointments, and domestic league structures. The game has transitioned into a state of permanent preparation for the most inclusive, yet most exclusive, tournament ever conceived by World Rugby. The storytelling potential of this tournament is off the charts, especially considering the debutants and emerging nations that could play the role of giant slayers. Hong Kong, China and Zimbabwe are not just there to make up the numbers, they are the wild cards that could catch a tired England or a distracted Australia off guard if they aren't shown the proper respect. Imagine the scenes if a minnow manages to take a point off a Tier 1 nation, throwing the mathematical permutations of the pool into absolute disarray. This is the beauty and the horror of the expanded format. There is more room for error, yet the presence of massive rivalries in the pools means that the margin for safety has actually shrunk for the big boys. The administrative clowns that Scott Stevenson famously attacked will be hoping this draw produces the financial windfall they desire, but the players will be the ones paying the price in blood and sweat on the pitch. The narrative is set, the players are chosen, and the countdown has begun for a tournament that will either cement legacies or destroy them in the Australian sun. As the final whistle of the draw ceremony echoed, the realization settled in that the 2027 World Cup will be won in the preparation phase as much as on the field of play. The nations that can keep their internal politics quiet and their locker rooms united will be the ones standing at the end. For England and Wales, the next few years of the Six Nations will be nothing more than a series of dress rehearsals for the main event in Australia. For the Wallabies and the All Blacks, every Bledisloe Cup match from now until then will be analysed for weaknesses that can be exploited in that historic pool clash. The silence of the boardroom has been replaced by the roar of the fans, who are already booking flights and debating the merits of their fly halves. We are entering an era of unprecedented transparency and pressure, where every decision made by a director of rugby is scrutinised through the lens of a November night in Australia. The game is no longer just about the 80 minutes, it is about the 3-year war of nerves that has just been declared. The road to the 2027 Rugby World Cup is paved with the broken dreams of those who failed to adapt to this new, brutal reality of pool stage carnage. England, Wales, Australia, and New Zealand have all been given a mountain to climb before they even see the knockout rounds, and the climb starts now. Whether the All Blacks can maintain their dominance or if the Wallabies can use the home crowd to reclaim their former glory is a question that will be asked 1,000 times before 2027. One thing is certain, the boring days of predictable pool outcomes are over, replaced by a high-octane schedule that demands excellence from day one. As the Silver Fern and the Wallaby prepare to face off, and the Rose and the Dragon sharpen their claws, the rugby world stands on the precipice of something truly legendary. Make no mistake, the 2027 World Cup draw has changed the sport forever, turning a global tournament into a series of localized explosions that will determine the future of the game. The countdown is on, and the stakes have never been higher for the men who carry the hopes of their nations. Would you like me to break down the potential round of 16 matchups based on these pool draws for all sports updates?